I think about it from an L&D perspective. This is a breakout moment where we can break out of just tactical execution of being a support function, because AI runs on context, and the richest source of context is what training teams have. They know about
Yeah,
the strengths and weaknesses and development opportunities for the humans, and that's precisely where AI should plug in.
exactly.
For frontline managers, it just, man, my heart goes out to them. They're in a very interesting moment right now where there's a lot of anxiety about AI, and they're the first point of contact of that anxiety from the
Mhm.
front line. And there's a lot of pressure from boards, C-suites, percolating down around, hey, let's go adopt AI. And they also become the contact point of that management pressures. It's a tale as old as time, but in this moment, they don't have a playbook. They don't know, they can't go into the repertoire and pull something out because everything is so new with AI. So
Yeah, yeah.
this
So it brings
moment.
up a couple of interesting things. I just attended this AI summit last couple of days, and so they talked about the three levels of where people are. People level one are using it kind of as a Google search function,
Mhm.
and then level two is kind of where people are using it day in and day out doing a variety of things. And then this level three is how do you begin to utilize agents? And so one of my aha moments was that in a lot of cases in organizations that I'm having conversations with, the people that are made responsible for making AI work, thinking about the use of agents, they're still at level one. They're still using it as Google. And so there's a huge disconnect for what it can do. And then it all resides in one place. So we might be talking and have a conversation with L&D team. Well, IT needs to be involved. Needs to be involved. Then ultimately, when you talk about from a representative standpoint, they don't even think about what does that even look like? What's the change management around all of those people? And then ultimately, as you said, primarily it's the first line, it's the first line manager that has responsibility for making the tools work on two ends. How does a rep use it in the field? How do I use it from a coaching and feedback standpoint for AI to help me be more effective in doing that? So there,
Absolutely. It's such a powerful point. I think everyone's trying to figure out, how do we go out of this innovation theater where, how do we take AI and agents from science experiments to actual scalable driver of business? When we look back, the frontline managers are going to they're going to be the heroes of this story, because they do become that point of contact.
that's why, I wanted to have a conversation because these are all the things that swirl in my mind as I'm trying to get up to speed on AI, how to be more effective at it, but also talking to your clients and all the challenges and things that they're having. And it's not just a pharma problem, it's kind of a worldwide. Everybody's kind of going through the same journey within the L&D and life sciences. There are particular elements to be concerned about, compliance, regulatory, those type of things that kind of fit. And then specifically what you guys do at ACTO, it's primarily within the life sciences. And I know that you work with a lot of L&D teams. Let me do a quick intro here. So Parth Khanna is the CEO and co-founder of ACTO, a platform used by many of the top pharmaceutical and biotech companies to improve how therapies reach patients after approval. So I believe in one of the blurbs I saw, you guys are working with 14 of the top 50 companies. Is that correct?
That's right, Keith. Yes, we're very glad and delighted that we get to work with so many brilliant folks in the industry, and we have about 50,000 field professionals across reps, MSLs, key account managers, patient support. So the front line, the unsung heroes of our healthcare system.
Well, Parth, welcome to the show, Inside Pharma Leadership. Really excited having you and having this conversation. I know one of the things that you had talked about earlier was this efficiency versus effectiveness. Define what that is and tell us a little bit more about that and what that means.
Yeah, Keith, firstly, thank you so much for having me here. It's such a pleasure, and I've admired you and the work that you do for so many years. So great that we can have this virtual fireside chat here and
Thank
bounce
you so
ideas
much.
with so much happening in our fields. It's interesting from an L&D perspective. I feel that L&D teams have been on this linear track for so many years where essentially we've been, and I hate to and dare to say this, we've been order takers for so many commercial, post-market commercialization functions. And we've all heard the adages of no matter what breaks in a commercial organization or medical organization, it's a training problem. Let's bring training in, tell them what courses need to be created, and the courses get created with the help of some agencies and it gets deployed. And also the timeless challenge of, well, how do we now prove our worth and value as an L&D function? Because the measurement mechanisms were just nebulous and hard to capture. So at the outset, it's always a training problem. When things succeed, training never gets a credit because there's hard to stitch together the causal relationships. And as it relates to AI, the biggest question on senior leadership's mind is what is the future of work going to be in this agentic AI era? And this is a moment for L&D truly where we we understand context. We understand what the gaps of our teams are and where AI needs to plug in to augment those gaps. And one of the things we just wrapped up these roundtables with senior executives, one phrase I heard that really stuck with me is instead of looking at AI as artificial intelligence, let's look at it as augmented intelligence. So it does bring up very important themes and motifs around effectiveness and efficiency and how they interplay and parlay together, where it's not just about churning out courses and checking the box and doing it efficiently. It's really also not just about completing the trainings in the hopes that it leads to effectiveness. It's both efficiency and effectiveness coming together in a way that lends the path for future of work. And what a great moment for L&D today.
Yeah, I agree with you, Parth. I think one of the advantages that AI has when we talk about context, it has the ability to get to know each individual person. Generally, when we've done training in the past, it's one size fits all. And even when we try to, gate things and make things available, each individual can be so different that it's oftentimes it's hard to say, did learning and development do its job? I mean, we have the base level, but when we think about how do we show that they're able to execute, that becomes a very important element. One comment that you made was around this confidence piece as a measurement. Tell us a little bit more about that and what would be the things that you would suggest that companies look at when they're trying to measure confidence.
Yeah, Keith, what's very interesting, we talked about context right now. I like to say content used to be king, context now is the queen, which is very interesting. Last year, we introduced this notion of empathetic AI to the market, and it was intentionally very provocative, where can AI be empathetic? Well, not to the extent that our neurobiology allows us, but what it can do, because these are predictive models, is they can move towards empathy, not in the sort of humans, but they can understand humans more. So, for example, if you think about there is an AI assistant or an AI agent, how you design your prompt and the additional context you give it, the more it will respond to what your needs are. So, as an example, let's say you have two MSLs. One is a rock star, Stanford MD, PhD, 20 years in therapeutic area experience, and another MSL, who's just getting in the field for the first time. So they have a lot of potential, but maybe they don't have 20 years of therapeutic area experience and all the strong credentialing that goes behind that. So in this case, what AI can do is not only are you giving it a prompt, but you can append the prompt with some of their background. You can append the prompt with how they performed in their training. So if this rockstar rep just blaze through their foundational training around physiology and anatomy, and the new rep had to go through that and they struggled for it. So AI can ingest all of that as context and respond to it in an empathetic way. So the old saying of don't throw a book at a person, AI can have that as context. And guess where that data resides? That data resides within the L&D functions. To go back to your other question around confidence, confidence is a measurement. One of the things that we've seen where AI agents and assistants can be extremely helpful is in getting information at the point of need. So when the same two MSLs are about to go talk to Dr. Willis, and right before their meeting, they're thinking, gosh, those last 5 pivotal trials that came out, I need to summarize them, and it's going to be a deeper discussion. And maybe I'm not sure about the study design. In that case, the agent can go across different systems of record, not only pull down the clinical papers and the research papers, go to the relevant sections, summarize it. And this is where the empathy kicks in, where it will give each different individual different rendition of that based on what it understands my human needs. And then when you compound that out, Keith, over time, it leads to just more confidence. The challenge in that match moment, right before they're about to go talk to the HCP, if they're not sure, today field teams have to rely on either frantically searching across their CMSs, LMSs, approved materials, PubMed, so on and so forth, all these different systems of record, or they call a colleague or their manager, and then that's a hit or a miss. Or the third and the least preferred path is you kind of wing it and you rely on incomplete memory, right? So this is where an agent that understands you as a human can go across those different systems of record. And I like to imagine a little software robot like Zazu from Flintstones, if you're the green alien that shows up. It can go across those different sources, scan the pages, get you the right information. And if it's exactly what you need, that builds trust. And then that trust, when you deliver the right message, have the right conversations with the HCPs, translates to your own self-confidence that, hey, I have now the tooling, no matter how complex the situation, it can support me. And we've seen this across so many right deployment and usages of agents. But the key word there is right, which is there's a lot to unpack there itself.
Okay. So a couple of questions, Parth. I would assume then that AI or the MSL rep or whoever has the ability to practice going back and forth to take that message that they've consolidated, they've seen it, and then kind of get some feedback, good to go, not good to go. So that would be one. So you can end up getting additional coaching, which improves confidence. I would assume you would be able to measure generally when a physician has a question that a representative MSL can't answer, they usually will call. And sometimes the information that they call about is stuff that's in the package insert that said person can talk to. So those would be some other measurements that I would think of. And then it leads me to another question. Can you define what an agent is? Because I think a lot of times people get confused. There are a lot of different things you talk about talking with we talk about all the things that AI can be, but if you could define agent for us, I think that would be helpful for a lot of people.
Absolutely, Keith. So the first starting point, let's actually work backwards in the evolutionary journey of how we came to agents. And there's another leap after agents, which is agentic AI, which we'll get to in a second as well. So let's work backwards from an agent. How this whole capability came to be is through large language models. And a lot of your listeners today would have heard the word large language model or generative AI. Essentially, what that means is at the root of it, human language is very predictive. And when we're doing these sessions, I like to ask audience members, I'll say a few words completed with the first word that comes to your mind. It's one of those games that we used to play as a kid. So if I say, Keith, the sky is, in most rooms, you will hear this unison of voice that says blue. And there's always one person who says falling, which is what makes human beings great, is because you have the right mix of optimism and cautious optimism. And then I would say, the chocolate is, and you hear sweet or delicious or creamy. And their clustering of word semantic relationships are always around taste. And with sky, it's around color. And when you say the car is, you hear fast or red or shiny. It's uh, regardless of what the word is, the root word is, the response has some semantic relationship with the word that we put out, the seed word that we put out. And that's the crux of how human language is constructed. It's very syntactical. There's rules that we follow in language, and there's word relationships that signify one object with the other. And that is at the heart of a large language model. So some brilliant scientists and engineers in various labs, what they saw very early on is that actually, you know what? Because language is so predictable, we can train artificial synthetic intelligence to predict how language occurs. And it's actually not even in these models. What's interesting is even the human brain, if you connect a bunch of electrodes to my brain as we did that exercise, before I could verbalize, the sky is, let's say, falling or blue, my brain waves that are generated that associate to a certain word before I even know consciously I'm going to articulate it. So that's the extent to which language is predictive, which is makes what makes these large language models work. So what these brilliant scientists did, they compressed all available written language in these models where based on one word, we can predict further words. And that's the whole notion of generative AI. It generates natural language and it understands natural language. As computation has become more powerful, we can do these really awesome and exciting things. Why that matters is it's very important for leaders to know and recognize that these Gen AI models, they're predictive, they're not perceptive like human cognition. So they will predict language and generate language based on what they're trained on and how the prompt is constructed and what you ask for it to generate. So that's your generative AI large language model at the heart of it. And what some brilliant companies, what they thought is like, well, this is actually very interesting. We have this model that can generate language and it has access to, let's give it access to all the Wikipedia and knowledge on the internet. And because the computation power is so strong today, maybe a user can quickly search information and these models can traverse through all these language relationships. How the science and the computer science of this works is not important, but for the audience, it's important to know that these are predictive language models. And that's where you get a Gen AI assistant, like a ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude AI, so on and so forth, where you're giving end users open access, direct access into all the language on the internet and how you can traverse through it. That's why ChatGPT, you ask a question, it will give you an answer as it's traversing through all the language that exists on the internet that it's been trained on. So that's your level one. And that is what happened in 2022, what we're calling now the ChatGPT boom, where these technologies that were behind closed doors for the most part, that were in research and development labs, OpenAI, what they came out and did, which was brilliant, was they opened it to everyone. They're like, hey, go interact with this generative AI model.
Okay.
So that gets to your level one. Your level two is some very brilliant researchers and computer engineers then said, hey, what if we gave, instead of it having access to all the knowledge available on the internet, what if we ring fenced the knowledge through which it could traverse and find information back? It still uses the same language predictive relationships, but now it's ring fenced. And that's what gets you into this world of RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, which is great for specific data pull and data retrieval and knowledge retrieval. So that's Gen AI assistant ring fenced by knowledge base, and that's what RAG is. And that's sort of your level two into the world of Gen AI tools. Then the third level, some very brilliant scientists and researchers said, hey, not only if we could ring fence it based on certain knowledge that it has access to, because these models can generate natural language and understand natural language, what if we gave them access to its own memory, its own reasoning ability, and its ability to talk to other tools, which they call tool calling? So a Gen AI assistant with a large language model at the heart of it, with the ability for tool calling, reasoning ability, and its own memory, so it can persist certain asks from the human, that is an AI agent. And it is great for single linear workflow tasks. For example, go read this document, identify certain key phrases, either and then go populate it in another database. That is a great example of a single point, single task workflow agent. Then the last step in this evolutionary chain is you have some brilliant scientists and researchers saying, wow, this is great. Now we have these models that understand natural language. They can call on tools. They can have their own memory. They can do some reasoning. What if we stitch them together in a string of pearls where they can because they can communicate in natural language, they can pass information and data to each other. Could we then use it for complex workflows and help people offload parts of their job? That is agentic AI. And the reason why agentic AI is powerful is it allows you to not only take on complex workflows, but also you can build compliance guardrails and have different multi agents in this string of pearls talk to each other and check each other's work. So you get just higher accuracy rates and it's just more compliant architecture. So Keith, I know that was a lot, but I thought it would walk
You
through
know,
the evolution of
helpful.
uh,
Definitely helpful because you hear these terms thrown around, and contextually, people need to understand what those things mean. I know one of the things that you've said, and I found this to be true. I think in my playing around with AI, whether you call it a clone, assistant, ultimately what you're doing is you're training it about you, whether it be your social style, goals, objectives, a whole bunch of other things. I find that when you do that, the answers and things that you get are more specific to you as an individual. And that brings to the question when it comes to training, whose responsibility is it to train that agent? Or if you're just using it as a chat, is it the individual person that's using it? And I'm thinking from an enterprise standpoint, because you're rolling out something at an enterprise level. And so there's clearly some training that goes on there. But what would be your recommendation and who ultimately is responsible for that training of that agent?
Keith, that's a great, great question. And the answer that, and I've spoken to now hundreds of leaders across the full spectrum of life sciences. In fact, we just did a 9-city roundtable and we had very senior leaders come to each roundtable and we talked about all these issues. The answer from my lens, after having these hundreds and hundreds of hours of conversation with senior leadership, nobody knows. It's still being determined. You have some organizations that are indexing more towards IT functions taking on that role, and some have completely decentralized to line of business leaders. And I actually think both have their pros and cons, and I don't think that's a Goldilocks answer. In my view, this is an opportunity for L&D teams to raise their hands and say, let us do it. Let us show how to do it the right way. Because one of the things that we heard in our London roundtable, this gentleman raised his hand and said, why are we trying to reinvent the wheel with how we test and govern these agents? We do have some frameworks from the human world that can be equally applicable. And what I mean by that is, let's say you design an agent that is meant to augment sales reps. And the skills that this agent possesses can range from pre-call planning, pulling clinical information, summarizing some key clinical data, and writing back to the CRM. Let's say those are the 3 or 4 skills that this agent possesses. And it's built on that agentic AI architecture that we talked about. Why not give this agent the same exam that the human has to pass before they get to the field? We design the same testing framework for the agent to pass. And we know that for humans, they have to get 90% on knowledge assessment before they can be field facing. And that's because compliance teams have recognized that human cognition is not perfect, but on a balance of probability, if I give this human being a question about, let's say, mechanism of action, 9 out of 10 times they should get that right. And when we've talked to compliance leaders, what they're saying is, look, we're not looking for elimination of risk entirely with agents. We just want quantification of that risk. And I think L&D teams are so well suited to not only train these agents, provide the context and empathy like we talked about before, but also make sure that they're tested. And from a security and compliance perspective, they're giving the right answers before these agents can be deployed in the fields, which is a step that so many organizations are completely skipping over right now. So what ends up happening is these agents do get in the field then. The rep goes and asks her questions, and they do ask a question around mechanism of action. The agent makes up a bunch of stuff, and the trust is gone forever.
Yeah,
That human is
exactly.
never trusting that agent again. And all those months of work have just been wiped out. And then that's why you have, McKinsey's and other consulting firms coming out and saying 9 out of 10 agent pilots are failing. And that's because they don't have someone that can be a steward of observability and monitoring that, hey, before we deploy, let's test the agent out just the same way we do that with humans.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
And I think L&D teams have a tremendous opportunity there.
You bring up a lot of different points because I think part of it gets back to it's like any project that you roll out. There's a whole change management process that has to happen also. So you think in terms of agents as almost like a rep, you're training them. There's a project that sits behind it because the more you use AI, you often know when it's just like, well, that's not what I wanted. So you kind of go back and forth. And so you're going and it's helping people understand that part of it is that the more that you use it, you're going to go back and forth. You're going to have some ideas of some things and its ability to help you think broader or come up with some things that are different than you would have come up with before is the beauty of AI. And so people miss that opportunity because they're looking for AI just to provide an answer. And it's to amplify you as an individual and as a human to make you more effective as a representative or MSL or whatever your role is within the organization by having access to a lot more data, a lot more information. It helps you ask a more effective question for a healthcare professional that maybe has the breakthrough that helps a patient and ultimately saves lives.
Absolutely, Keith. We deployed at one of this biotech company, and this rep came back and they said, "Hey, I was with an OBGYN and they had a question about this new paper that came out, and I wasn't sure. So I asked an agent that was able to traverse through all the different systems of record, get me the approved answer, and their medical team had made sure that the agent was at almost near using RAG and agentic architectures that we talked about. It was tested, they were observing it, they were monitoring it, they were satisfied with the risk behind the scenes. And in the field, the agent gave the right answer, and the rep came back and said, "Hey, typically I would have to wait 2 weeks to come back and give the OBGYN that answer." And in those 2 weeks, those were, I'm paraphrasing, but these were her words. In those 2 weeks, I would have lost some mind share. They would have, another competitor would have come in and we wouldn't have gotten all those new patient starts that we now did because I was able to answer the question in the right moment. But that only works if AI is designed and deployed in the right way. And so much of it comes down to making the right, it's a design choice. Are you going to, and I love, Keith, what you said about amplifying humans. And it relates to change management because if you go out and you say, "Hey, we're building these agents because we want to cut down jobs," no one's going to buy into that. And they, rightly so. That should not be the ethos of why you're building AI. The ethos of why you're building AI is there's more high value work that can be done by humans. Things that human cognition really does well is human connection, strategy, and judgment. So we're going to try to give more time back for that. And then are there parts of your job that we can bring an agent to support you in? And every leader should know this. As leaders, we've all gone through the journey where we've tried to do everything. And eventually we conclude, man, I got to focus on my areas of strength.
Exactly.
I think leaders, if they approach it with that sense of empathy that we're going to give the tooling that we've all enjoyed as leaders for so many years across the organization, I think you get a very different results. And guess what? Your field teams know it when these tools are being built in earnest and the messaging connects with that, the way that the tools are designed connects with that, the adoption immediately skyrockets. We've had in some of these deployments, net promoter score from the frontline teams at 9.5 out of 10. And I was talking to my team and I was saying, well, what a big surprise if you approach it with the sense of we're going to put humans at the center and play for team human. Folks are going to respond to that.
Makes perfect sense. I know we have a few minutes here. If you were giving advice to an L&D leader and they were going to be deploying AI, what three things would you tell them that they should be thinking about?
Ooh, Keith, I love that question. First one is look at the job descriptions, not as a relic of the past, but blueprints of the future. Job descriptions, JDs, those
Yeah.
artifacts that sit in Workday and
Yeah.
no one ever looks at them.
Yeah, yeah. See, now you hit a spot. We may end up having to have another conversation because I came up with this idea around job description, competency model, and curriculum, and it's almost changes as you go because you're trying to map out what training should look like, and it can almost be just in time. Oftentimes, we wait because the role keeps changing as we learn new stuff, but
And Keith, thank you for saying that. And now add AI to that equation, right? So a lot of folks are going out and asking around whether they're in IT or L&D, well, what are the AI use cases? Because the CEO and the board that's the mandate right now. No organization wants to get left behind. And the reality for life sciences companies is we've done a brilliant job in adopting AI in R&D and clinical realm. So you have pipelines that have gone on this J curve where rubber meets the road, which is post-market commercialization, post-approval. We're trying to figure it out. And so you have folks going around the enterprise asking, hey, what are workflows that you would like to automate? What should we do? And I just think that is a very inefficient and flawed approach because the answers are in job descriptions. So what I suggest, my suggestion to L&D leaders would be take that JD and put it in a centrifuge, let it spin around, and you get what floats to the top, work that is dull, difficult, repeatable, highly data intensive. That's perfect for AI agents. And what sediments at the bottom, which is work related to human connection, strategy, judgment, showing up in front of the HCP, looking at their facial cues and tailoring that message, that's ideal for human cognition. For God knows how long it's just this LLM technology is not built for that. So what I would say is lean into the conversation of future of work, lead it, and lean into those areas of human skills development where AI is not going to perform well, human connection, strategy, and judgment, and then work with your IT partners and line of business partners to say, okay, for these 4 or 5 things on this person's JD that we're going to have to build multi-skilled agents for, let us be your partner that helps provide the context, the empathy, and the testing environments so you can deploy these agents with confidence. And that's the future of L&D. And the answers are right there in these role-based job descriptions. And the last benefit of that is not only will AI work better, you'll have a clear-eyed view on where L&D will play a role, but also from change management. It's so powerful when you go to your field teams and say, hey, let's talk about your future of your work and job. We know it's here. You're smoldering on the inside, wondering if your job's going to get automated. Let's actually examine it and let me show you that it won't. And here's how. And it's such a powerful message that the field frontline teams really appreciate. And going back to our opening conversation, Keith, frontline managers, if you give them a simple mental model like this, they can communicate this forward. So that's what my recommendation would be for L&D teams.
Great, Parth. We're going to end there. Thank you so much for joining Inside Pharma Leadership. And where can we find you?
You can find us there. You can find me on LinkedIn, Parth Khanna. And I even give out my phone number, Keith. It's 289-800-1600. Drop me a text. Let's talk about AI. And Keith, honored to be here. Love your presence and all the amazing work that you do. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Parth.